I've been trying to complete this recording for 17 hours. All right, previous video, last summer of childhood, was the weekdays. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then the 5 variants of scene sequel writing. I plan to write one day using each, right, from transition to transition or sequel to sequel, as Walter S. Campbell taught, and then Dwight Swain's version, right, from goal to goal. And then that was 5, and here's 5 more, because on weekends, the last summer of my childhood, we traveled. We'd see family and family friends in 5 different locations. Now, we would go to Tulsa and visit my uncle and aunt, my dad's brother and his wife, and their 3 children. They lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We lived in Wichita, Kansas, or Lawrence for a while. And here's me on my bicycle, my cool brother, Shades, and my 3 younger girl cousins. When I went to Oklahoma City, I had 3 older girl cousins. I wasn't yet a teenager, and they all were teenagers in Oklahoma City. But in Tulsa, we rode bikes, and the youngest one rode trike, and it was just a wonderful time. I mean, I'm smiling, Chrissy's smiling, Cindy's smiling. My brother thought smiling didn't make him look cool, and Kay was too young, really. She was actually the youngest, but she doesn't always look the youngest. So then after that, we would, the next weekend, we'd go to Oklahoma City. And there were 2 friends who were like family. Ted was my dad's best friend in school, and Carla was one of my mom's best friends in school. Now, Mom grew up in the American Legion Home School in Ponca City, and there was a dormitory type places with several beds, and she had several roommates who they always called themselves sisters, from what they just called the homeschool. Well, Ted and Carla married, so it was like a brother and sister, friends got married, and they were just wonderful people. They remained family in my heart all of their lives. Great people. Then the next, we went back to Oklahoma City, but to visit my mother's actual sister, older sister, Aunt Verna. And she owned a bookstore, and she was principally responsible for teaching me to read and write. She had several bookstores in Oklahoma City, and that's where I met Dwight Swain. She introduced me. She knew, most of the writers. Well, Oklahoma City's big, but many of the writers. They would come in one or another of her bookstores. And whenever they came in, my aunt would introduce me and say, "This is my nephew, Robbie. He's going to become a writer." Of course, they would often very quickly jump to terms that I didn't know. But I grew up in an environment where I was frequently talking to published writers. My aunt wrote a couple books. I have a copy of one of them. They're not big sellers. So just briefly, what my older cousins in Oklahoma City, the boy Jesse wore a black leather jacket, was a black belt in karate, rode a motorcycle, and gave me scary fast rides. Coolest guy ever, died way too young. Then I'd squeeze into the VW Bug with my teenage girl cousins, and we'd go to drive in and drive up a hamburger joint, and they would buy me what I wanted, an enormous cheeseburger with onions and with French fries and ketchup. But before I could get my food, my greasy bag of food, I had to dance with them. And we danced in a parking lot of the fast food place or in a nearby park at or on a concrete picnic table. People would watch us. Handful of kids, teenagers, and me, not yet a teenager, dancing. They'd either play the car radio or transistor radio. And they'd all sing along, and they wanted me to try to sing along, but I didn't know the words to the songs. I didn't listen to pop music, something teenage girls do. Wooly Bully, I Got You, Babe. And they called me Sweet Pea. There's a song, Sweet Pea, by Tommy James, or Tommy Rowe did Sweet Pea. And then the McCoys did Hang On Sloopy. This went on summer after summer, 9, 10, 11. I didn't want to dance and sing with them, but I couldn't get my cheeseburger unless I did. Of course, I matured and things changed, but that last summer of my childhood, I had to dance with the girls to get my food. Then I'd go to my aunt's bookstore, and I loved it. And now here I am, 60 years later, remembering all my family down there. They're almost all dead. I have one living cousin from there, and I don't know if I told them how much I enjoyed it, despite my protests. I love them, and I love the times. I don't have any memory of actually telling them I loved them and loved the times, but I do regret that. I will write about them. Wonderful, wonderful people. And then we'd go the next weekend. We'd go to Ponca City, and my great uncle Ross Beatty and my grandfather, who had died in a car wreck long ago, had started a place called Beatty's Triple X. And everybody's always told me I took after Uncle Ross, great Uncle Ross, to me. And I'll write about him. He was in the news for one thing or another. And later, when I was 14, I remember actually leading up to that, but in the 60s, Ross had bought an old railroad dining car and put it across the street from the bus station in Ponca City. And when I became a teen, I'm jumping way ahead, but my aunt wanted me to take over a bookstore, and my uncle wanted me to take over what was just called the shop then. And I didn't want to do either. And I regret not talking with them about it more. But I didn't do it. And we'd also visit my dad's cousin Junior. He's my dad's age. They were not only cousins, but best friends. Sit and talk for hours. And they'd let me listen. And boy, cousin Junior, his name was Herman Roach Jr. And he's the other guy that I was told I kind of take after. So then the last of the 5 weekend rotation, we again went to Ponca City and Blackwell to visit family and friends. Now, just as Carla had been one of Mom's roommates and sisters as she was growing up in the homeschool, there were others. Aunt Doran Francis Pierce. Well, Doran married Uncle Bernie. And January 2nd, 2003, I called him. That was not unusual. He wasn't surprised. If you read my book, Nightmare in Wichita, The Hunt for the BTK Strangler, you'll see Bernie Dorotsky in the book because he captain of Homicide detectives, and I asked him if he could talk about BTK. BTK, this is February 25th, 2025. He was arrested 20 years ago today. So, when I was young, I just thought he was actually my uncle. But later I understand the story about mom having several women she called her sisters from the American Legion Homeschool. My dad had attended the Ponca Military Academy, so he had a bunch of brothers. Francis Pierce was the funniest human being I ever knew. I will tell some Francis Pierce stories, and they won't be on print probably as funny as they were in the telling. And again, I will do the same thing, tell these 5 different weekend trips using all these variants at one place or another in passages of scenes and sequels. There's not no law. It says you have to do the Swain version or the Campbell version or the variants Chester, Coyne, and Jon Franklin. Jon Franklin was awarded 2 Pulitzer Prizes for his writing, so I'll particularly focus. Now, eventually, I'll publish the stories, but I will publish another version with like the left-hand side of the page will be the story, and the right-hand side of the page will be talking about why it's written this way, and some other elements of writing, why I use an active voice here and a passive voice here. If you spend the time, I understand if you're writing for a newspaper, you don't have time for much more than journalistic writing. But for writing a book, hopefully you have time to craft it and say what you want to say and use, the many various literary techniques. And that's what I plan to do. Presuming I live long enough, I will got plenty of stories to tell.